Good afternoon. I have to remain within a perimeter, and I'm very bad at that. So if you see me leaning forward or going too far, yes, please help me. Well, I would like to start by thanking you for having me again. I was here last year. I don't know how many of you were in my class. Yes? Quite a few? Okay. Because I hate to sound redundant and give you similar information. So today I took a big risk. I came to you, the evangelist of Agile, with some suggestions on how to maybe modify it or at least understand Agile when you take it across cultures. Because you see, that's what I do for a living. I respond to crises from Agile users, it seems nowadays. And companies normally only come to me when they are feeling a major pain because big projects are failing. So I am in favor of preventive measures, and I believe that as Agile users, you could understand, because I know you can, how culture shapes people's values and what they bring to the workforce when they are part of your team. And I have worked, in fact, with several of you. I recognize you in the audience and your companies. And I really believe that the model is not going to change. Going global and working with people who are scattered all around the world is really here to stay. And I have said that in my previous session. I have said that last year. Our education system is failing us drastically. We do not teach how to effectively work across cultures in middle school, high school, university, postgrad, anywhere. And it is really a shame because for most of us, the minute, especially in the high-tech industry, the minute you're going to be joining a company, you will be paired with people who are from a different culture. It can be right there within your location locally, or it can be across time zones. So I'm pretty sure that this resonates with you. That's probably why you are in my session. And so I really would like to warn you and to beg of you to keep an open mind. I am not an Agile user. So I am not here to teach you how to use Agile. I'm here to share with you the perspective of the people who use Agile in different parts of the world and how the core beliefs of Agile that are really grounded and rooted in American values don't travel that well, and what is lost in translation. So this is my intent. It is not to criticize, it is not to be negative. It is only to inform and hopefully to pass on some suggestions that will hopefully help. So let me try to operate this. Yes. So for those of you, yeah, very high tech. For those of you who were in my session last year, you may remember this. This talks about the 7 cultural dimensions. From culture to culture, there are some constants. And I am not going to revisit all of those. This is part of the 2-day program that participants really learn about. Once you understand how to position yourself within culture, you realize that you have power. You have the power to adjust your own behavior. You have the power to adjust your delivery. You have to adjust to meet people halfway. Because this is truly the name of the game. You have to meet people halfway. And those 7 cultural dimensions are constant from culture to culture. So quickly going over them, we have the way society is organized, which is called social stratification. In the United States, we come from an egalitarian culture. If you go to India, if you go to Asia, if you go to many parts of Africa or Latin America, you will find a more hierarchic type of society. And this is important within Agile, the waterfall model versus the flat linear model that you have. Then we have the level of independence. People here are extremely individualistic. We teach that from birth to children in the United States. Well, as soon as you leave, it is much more a group-oriented culture. Even Canada is more group-oriented than the United States is. Then the business focus. Here people are very, very much transaction-oriented. It is all about the business and how quickly can we get to the business. In my previous session, somebody said, I think Brady, she said, we call India and we're just like, hey, quick question. And, we don't even say hello. We don't even greet one another. It's just like, hey, quick question. I have 3 bullet points that I need to get through. And, well, believe it or not, this comes across as incredibly rude. It's just like, well, I'm not a peon. I'm not a number on the other side of the phone or Skype. What about saying hello? So when we talk about the business focus, it's very much the transaction versus relation-oriented communication. This is a very direct culture when it comes to communication, not as direct as my home culture, which is Switzerland. We are even much more to the point, and we have the art of shredding people to ribbons. I can show you that. If you want to become my friend, I can do that. But if you go to India, if you go to China, the Philippines, Brazil, you will realize that people have a tendency to dance around the issue much more. It's a sign of respect. They don't want to tell you exactly how they feel because they don't want to offend you. Well, that is cultural. And as we will discuss throughout this session, it is not just an ill will that they don't want to behave like you. They have been conditioned from birth to abide to those cultural demands where we don't talk to one another that way. That's not acceptable. Last year in my session, we talked at great length about the difference between the nuclear family and the extended family, and how, based on those models, what kind of skills do we give to children? I mean, imagine all of us right here in this section having to live together from now on. Well, do you really believe that our parents would teach us to be confrontational, to contest authority, to be in each other's face like we do here? I don't think so, because we would kill one another. So we are teaching children who live in the extended family society to be much more driven by harmony. Don't argue, just obey, just do what you're told. We seek constant harmony. And so it's very difficult from one day to the next, suddenly you are asked to become confrontational because you have never been taught those traits. So when you look at communication pattern, I know it's a biggie, it's a huge, huge deal for multicultural distributed teams because we want people to communicate like we do. So you will see I have quite a few stories for you as we move forward. Concept of time. Well, I'm from Switzerland. I'm supposed to be extremely punctual, and I'm not. But my culture really is, and you guys really are as well. You are taught from day one to have good time management skills. So I was in Bangalore in April. Hi, Karen. And I talked to the team there, and I asked them, I said, when did you learn time management skills? And they said, well, like what? What define management skills? So I said, if you're in school, you have a project, or, you are given homework for the week and you have to organize yourself. And they said, college, late college years, maybe post-grad. So not skills that are ingrained in them like we do here. I remember taking my daughter to preschool. She was 3. And I taught her to read the numbers on the oven because I needed her to recognize the time that she needed to be in the hallway with her shoes on, right? And those are the things that we do. We do it automatically in the culture we come from. Well, if time is not very important in the culture you come from because time is your best ally, time always comes back. Think about it. Every morning the sun shines. Well, not in Portland, but I live here. I'm entitled to say that. But it's true. Every day, the day breaks, right? So time, in a way, is your best friend. It's your ally. Why are you going to fight time? It's always there for you. And we have made it our enemy in this culture. So very, very different perspective on time. Handling change. I mean, you guys are born into change. I have worked with companies that tell me the only constant in my company is change. Well, let me tell you, in Switzerland and Germany, we hate change. We don't want change. You go to India, change is a criticism to the forefathers who have, been part of this great culture and society. We don't like change. Change is a criticism. So there is a very different concept of embracing change or not, and not everybody shares that opinion. Career orientation. I mean, you guys, if there is a bad build, you don't go home. Even if it's Friday night and you had plans to go camping with your family, I have seen it. I have seen team members in this country who will call their wife or their husband and said, honey, I'm sorry, I'm having problems at work. You will have to take the kids and go camping without me. I have never heard that anywhere else in the world. Never. We go camping and then we come back on Monday because it's like the sun. Work will always be there. You come back on Monday and that work will be waiting for you. Why would you waste a very good weekend of camping to fix a bad bill? So you need to realize that those dimensions, depending on where you come from, vary greatly. And as Nehru told us, there is no universal truth. Whatever you think is the best way to do one thing might not be the case. Someone else may feel that their universal truth is superior to yours. So this is just to put a little bit of background on what we did last year and to position what culture is about. Today we're going to talk about a different angle. But before we do that, and I need to move this. Is this better? I hope so. Let's talk about stereotypes, generalities, lies, and videotapes. I know that people in the West, especially, are very much against any generalities because we are taught that we are unique. Every child is unique, right? And it's true. However, without stereotypes and without generalities, there is no culture. Because a culture is made of generalities and sometimes stereotypes. So I want you, as we go through this session, to keep an open mind. I told you I'm Swiss and I'm not punctual. It's not because I'm not punctual that my entire country is not punctual. They are. I am the exception. And I cannot tell you that whatever you told me about Switzerland and people being obsessed about time is wrong because I'm not punctual. So we need to separate group behaviors from individual behaviors. And my field, the field of cross-cultural communication and cultural intelligence, is based on group behaviors, okay? So you probably have seen these pictures. It is circulating around the internet like crazy, yes? No? Nobody had seen it? Come on. Did I offend you? Okay, and this is not working anymore. Okay, within Agile, I have talked to many Agile trainers, and they're constantly dancing around the issue of culture. They acknowledge the problems that cultural differences bring to the equation, but they don't want to tag them as cultural differences because they tend to believe that corporate culture is stronger than national culture. So I thought I would spend a few minutes just showing the misconception right there. Here is corporate culture, and you probably have all seen or understood that model: business perspective, managerial perspective, personal perspective, right? We have human resource, organization development, management system development. That is, in a few words, the definition of corporate culture. Now, what is national culture? Well, national culture is what really covers everything else. let me tell you, I have worked, so I'm from Switzerland, and then I worked for a Taiwanese company, I worked for a South African company, I worked for a Brazilian company, and then I started working for North American companies. And I will tell you that each company had a very strong corporate culture. But guess what? It was the copy carbon of the national culture. Because the national culture is feeding us those cultural norms, the behaviors, what is accepted, what is good, what is wrong, what is right. Well, then the people who are in management, when they join a corporation, they bring those beliefs and concepts with them, and they shape the corporate culture. My point here, yes, I have one, is that if you think that corporate culture, which I know Agile is really based upon that belief, that when you take Agile to India or the Philippines, you name it, if you believe that the corporate culture is strong enough to hold that together and you will have no impact from those 7 cultural dimensions we just discussed, then you need my help. Because the national culture is always there, and this is the title of this presentation, it will trump strategy, always. So you need to pay attention to that. If you don't believe me, if you doubt the power of corporate culture versus national culture, I encourage you to watch this movie. It's from 2007, it's nothing new, but it has not been widely watched in the US. It's a Belgian movie, that's why, with Japanese subtitles. So one day that you're not hungover and you have a fresh mind, do watch Fear and Trembling. It's a very, very good movie about a young girl from Belgium who was born in Japan. And at the age of 4, she went back to Belgium, but all her life she idealized Japan. So she became an interpreter, Japanese, French, and then she moves to Japan to live her dream. And as you can see, this is her dream. She's cleaning the bathrooms in Japan. And she's very, very qualified. And the story behind it is extremely funny. It's rated for all ages. And it's a very powerful message about national culture versus corporate culture. Now, let's go a little bit deeper into our model here. When I work with teams, I use the Richard Lewis model. And that model is widely used in some of the best business schools in the world. It's used at Oxford, Duke, Princeton, and it is truly to analyze people's cultural DNA. And what we find when we are part of a team, when we are a multicultural distributed teams, we need to understand people's cultural DNA in order to build those bridges. So quickly, we look at 3 dimensions here. We have the linear active, and the United States, Switzerland, the Netherlands, we're right here in the blue. We are cool, we knew we were cool, right? Cool, factual, decisive planners. Now, if you go to the red, you will find Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa. People are warm, emotional, loquacious, impulsive. Then you go to the yellow, and that is Asia. People are courteous, amiable, accommodating, compromisers. Now, this is a team that I mapped recently. And as you can see, they're all over the map, which is a very good thing, because that's where the strength is brought into the equation. But this is just to show you that there is a possibility to organize the chaos, because I know that many people who work across cultures, there is a point where they just kind of lose their passion, because they feel that they either don't have the right tools or they don't know how to adapt their own behavior to reach the people they work with. And it becomes tedious, it becomes depressing. People leave. I mean, most companies that hire me, it is a revolving door. People are constantly leaving. And if you own a company, you know that the onboarding is the most expensive part of running a company. So it's very important to not just slap warm bodies together, but to find a way to draw the strength of the people we are bringing on board Because most of the companies you work for, I want you to know, have the capacity to hire the best wherever they are. People in India, they want to work for a big American multinational. And those people are high achievers. They graduated from the best schools. They speak 5 languages. They have real talent that they bring to the equation. But we don't really know how to bridge those talents. Quickly, here are the descriptives of those 3 dimensions we just looked at. And just looking at the first 2, I just want you to get a feel for how it works. But a linear active, someone who is that planner, very cool and linear thinker, will talk half the time. Now, if you go to Latin America, people talk most of the time. And then you go to the reactive culture and people listen most of the time, right? So you have very different behaviors. When you put people in a meeting or on the phone, you realize that what comes out of them is sometimes 180 degrees the opposite of what you were taught to do. Does one thing at a time, people plan from A to Z. Multi-active, they do several things at once. It may seem very chaotic to you, but they reach the same results. It's just not the order that you would have preferred. And reacts to partner's reaction. In the yellow, which is most Asian countries, in fact, that's not here, but if we go back here, you realize the yellow, you have all the way from India in the gold to Singapore, even Canada. People are, much more inclined to listen. They want to know your opinion first, and then they're going to talk. And for many Americans, it's become quickly annoying. It's just like, well, I want to know how you feel. And they're going to say, well, how do you feel? And it's like, no. I want you to tell me first. And they're just like, well, I want you to tell me first. So it is that dance that we need to break, right? So, but if we look at this, we realize that whenever we pick up the phone, whenever we write an email to someone who is located in a different time zone, or maybe even in the cubicle next door, but who was brought up in a different culture, we need to keep those colors in mind. We need to realize that in order to reach those people and engage them in the conversation, we need to adjust our delivery. And we also need to engage a different type of filters when we hear from them. We need to know how they're going to respond. So we have the tool and we are prepared to engage in a conversation that is not 100% meeting our cultural expectations. So let's go deep down Agile. I hope nobody packed tomatoes, because my dress is practically new and tomatoes stain. So I really want you to be open-minded as we go down the Agile models. So this comes straight from a book, so I know I'm safe there. Eliminate waste, amplify learning, decide as late as possible, deliver as fast as possible, empower the team, build integrity, and see the whole. Agile reminds me of the Communist Manifesto. You know why? Because in theory, it's wonderful. I mean, if you read about communism, it is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I want everybody to be equal. I want everybody to have access to the exact same value and power. But we know that the reality is quite different, isn't it? So when we think about any kind of manifesto, we need to realize that there is a difference between the theory and the reality. Now, the Agile framework really works on and is based upon the knowledge worker and a good problem-solving ability. As I told you, I'm from Switzerland, and I want you to know that my problem-solving ability compared to an American was very low when I moved to this country. I came here to go to grad school, and my first assignment, my professor told me, what I had to do, all of us in the classroom, and coming from Switzerland, where I had gone to university and graduated with high honors, I was waiting for my professor to tell me how to do the project, right? So I waited and waited and waited because I was new and my English was really bad, worse than now. And he never called. So finally, I went to office hours and I said, what about this project? And he said, well, where are you at? And I said, well, I haven't started. I don't know what to do. And he was like, whoa, you're in deep trouble. Because it's due in like 3 weeks. And I was like, what do you mean it's due in 3 weeks? You haven't given me anything. I mean, where is the guidelines? Where is the how-to? And he said, well, you're a big girl. You go to the library. You do your own research. You write down what you think is appropriate. And then you present it to me. And I failed the class. It was just like that. I failed the class because my culture had conditioned me to follow very strict directives. And here, there is no directives because you guys learn this. My daughter is 9, and I see how her education is shaping her. I see how she receives her homework on Friday for the following Friday, and she has to organize herself, manage her time. She's 9. I'm in a panic most of the time. And she said, no, Mommy, you should not help me. The teacher said that it's for me to do. And I'm like, what? I mean, I should be doing your math. That's what my father did. So you have a very, very different model, definitely. And so that problem-solving ability that you teach to kids from day one, I have watched you. My husband is American. When my daughter goes to her and she asks for something, he says, well, how would you do it? And then she says, and he said, well, try to do it this way. In my culture, we just say, let me show you, boom. And we do it for you. So your workforce comes to the job when they graduate from college with very different skills than the rest of the world does, right? And when we go down the Agile framework, we meet a lot of things where we can kind of hear the not matching well. Guiding vision, team ownership based on respect. We're going to look at this because respect is something that every human being needs and wants. It's part of our humanity. But the way to display respect in the Philippines, in Brazil, or in Switzerland is very different than in the United States. So it's a loaded word. Then we looked at autonomy-based because light touch, don't micromanage. What I told you about me failing my class. I wanted to be micromanaged. I have always been micromanaged. That's all I know. Do not suddenly drop me into the air and ask me to organize myself. I don't know where to start. I learned. Yes, it was painful. But I learned because I live here. And I saw the benefit and I had kind people holding my hand. But when you think about that autonomy base, you guys are born into it. We are not. Communication. You talk about collocation in Agile. I have read a lot of books, by the way, they were very tedious. For someone who is not, a technical person, it was part of my growing process. So the collocation, I read that in every book, so it must be like grounded in something real. And when I look at multicultural distributed teams, the collocation concept kind of get lost, don't you think? This easy access to communication, the fact that we can all kind of like go to one office and work together on that problem is gone. So I have worked with teams that were 120 people wide. And here the book says 5 to 9 people. I'm not good with numbers. I told you my father did my math, but I noticed that there was a difference. Team motivation, self-directed, initiative-driven, back to our concept. Those are very US-centric values. Very difficult for people who are not raised here to suddenly show initiatives. Features, clearly stated requirements. Well, once again, when you're not taught to really speak up and point out where things should not belong, it's very difficult. And prioritization, the must have, should have, could have, won't have. That's all part of having that strong concept of what belongs and what doesn't, and having that authority that as a person, even if you're not in power or in management, you can have a say. So very, very different. Now, I decided to do some graphic for you. So you can see it's very elaborate, isn't it? I also decided to mix colors. If you look at those two elements with dimension, the reactive and the multi-active, if you mix them together, I learned in kindergarten, it gives you orange. So from now on, we're going to look at the orange as the waterfall model. And that waterfall model, and I know, Diane, are you here? No, Diane is not here. I had some very good conversations with some Agile real evangelists. And they told me that they feel in implementing Agile that the US was in fact not the linear active flat, like this. They told me, no. A lot of people in the US are very much in the waterfall model. And I agree with that. I'm sure that there are some people who feel that being transparent and all of this is difficult. It's difficult for everyone. But unless you have really lived abroad, unless you have really experienced how hierarchic. I lived in Chile during the Pinochet dictatorship. Every night when I would come home, there was a curfew at 8 o'clock at night, and my neighborhood was guarded with Kalashnikov. Coming from Switzerland was quite a shock. People in Chile have been conditioned, because it hasn't been a long time, since 1990, that's when Pinochet left. So we have an entire or several generations of people who have been conditioned by military. So very hierarchic. You look at the Philippines with Ferdinand Marcos, same thing. He left in 1983. The people we have in the workforce today have been conditioned from a dictatorship. So I agree that, some people may respond in the US kind of like into the waterfall deal, but when you compare it to other culture, trust me, they are really in the flat, linear, initiative grabbing, and it's a very, very different model. But you know that model, right? So here, once again, is what I see from my perspective. When I work with those teams, I see that in Agile, we have that fluidity, right? We want people to be equal. We want people, one of the things that one of the Scrum Master told me, he said, I am like the director of an orchestra. I have all of those self-employed people, and I am here to iron out some of the problems. Now, when I go across cultures, he said, I am the director of a cacophony, because nobody really is self-employed any longer. They all need me to be their boss. So we have, this is very good graphic, isn't it? It's different. We have the very controlled pyramid, and then we have that very fluid arrow. So you need to understand that this will create some massive conflict and resistance when you work within Agile. The minute you leave the United States, you're going to be confronted with this. People don't know how to behave in that fluid thing. And because they don't know and they don't want to admit that they don't know, it becomes even more complicated. Team motivation. I hear that a lot. I hear people in Agile, especially in the US, complaining that, the team lacks motivation. They want that initiative coming from the person. So if you look at the waterfall versus the Agile, the waterfall, as I said, is really the world. It's the yellow mixed with the red, and then we have the linear, the blue. So closely managed teams versus self-directed teams, which is what we have in the US mostly. Take directions, take initiatives. Seek individual team rewards, focus on team contributions. Concentrate on low-level objectives, concentrate on solutions. Follow process, look for better ways of working. And finally, very reactive in the waterfall and proactive in the Agile framework. So when your expectations come from this column, and you're dealing with people who come from this column, and who have never lived or went to school in the US, who have never really experienced the difference, they cannot understand what you mean. When you ask them, for example, to take initiative, they don't know what that means. I didn't know. I didn't know, and I'm from Switzerland. I mean, come on. It's not that far, right? So we need to realize those differences and take them into consideration. Now, how many people here have heard of cultural neuroscience? What? Nobody? Okay, I will have to do a TED talk. Loading up. So, cultural neuroscience is my best friend. It's a very new field. It's only 5 years old. And it is really proving with scientific facts, because I know that you guys are very fact-driven, and I'm not. So I need like some empirical evidence to show my team leaders and my directors, when I work with those teams, that those differences are rooted and grounded in something scientific. So when cultural neuroscience came along, it has become my Bible. That's truly, I read everything those scientists publish. It is absolutely fascinating. One of the things that neuroscience is proving is that the brain, we're all born as babies, we're all the same, right? We all have the same physiology and humanity. Well, what cultural neuroscience is showing is that, let's say, you are born in Japan and you guys are born in Portland, Oregon. Well, those cultural norms that we are teaching children from day one on, how to behave, how to show respect, how to not agree, what is the body language. I mean, if you have a child at home, all the things that we consciously or unconsciously teach our children shapes the wiring of the brain. And if you look at the descriptive on the key factors versus the core process, you realize that just about anything that is part of our daily life, even the air we breathe, has an impact on how our brain shapes up. And we have done, I would say we, because I'm on the TED Talk now, but they, the scientists, have done some very interesting research. And one of those research is about two men. One is Japanese, one is American, and they are both, fully wired with all of the gimmick, and they are asked to press a button when they feel that something is shown and that is disrespectful to them. And they can really see the lightening of the brain when they recognize something that is disrespectful. And the other component is to show a person who is in a position of influence, someone who will be dominant. So they are showing a picture, a movie. I wish I had it, but it's too long. And so the picture, the movie shows an American man in Japan. And the American man is very polite in our eyes, and he goes there and sits down and talks. And the Japanese's brain is just like beeping red. It's just like, because everything he does is inappropriate. He looks at people in the eyes, he wants to shake hands, he sits down like this. And so the Japanese brain reaction is very, very strong. Then they ask the Japanese in this picture, who is in a position of respect? And he says, well, definitely the gentleman on the left. And who is in a position of being dominant? And once again, he says, the gentleman on the left. And of course, the American answers the exact opposite. And when you look at the brain and the wiring and what it's showing, different parts of the brain are lighting up. And it is absolutely fantastic, and it is very important for us to remember that. Because when we work with teams, and this is truly, I would say, at least 2 hours of my day every day, I receive phone calls from my clients, and they say, I don't understand. I don't understand. I have told them 1,000,000 times to change that behavior. And they don't understand that the neurological pathways are, the words they say, I have asked them to not do that, and they say yes, and they go back to work and they do it. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand. I mean, am I not clear? Am I Am I not talking to them? I am not reaching them. So I'm gonna tell you a quick story. When I met my husband, he didn't speak French, and my English was really bad, but we met speaking English. And then he decided when he married me that out of respect for my parents, he would learn French. And he did, and we had au pairs living with us for several years, and French became the home language. So my husband became very good at speaking French. But because I had met him speaking English, every time, like we would be speaking French right now together, and here is my husband coming, and guess what? I would switch to English. And he would be so offended, but so offended. He would say, what is it? My French is not good enough. I mean, why can you not speak French to me? I invested all of those years. Everybody tells me my French is good. Why can you not speak French to me? It practically broke my marriage until cultural neuroscience came along. And I could prove to him that my pathways were wired, literally the connectors were made in English. And the minute I see him, the minute I hear his voice, my brain switches to English. And it's horrible. I don't want it, but my brain does it, you know? And I haven't been overserved. It's just the way it is. So when we think about people and you say, I just told them that, and then they go back to work and they do exactly the opposite, I understand. I understand how the wiring of the brain works. And the amount of time and support and coaching that it takes for people to realize that those behaviors must be altered, and it is very deep. It is very, very deep, and it needs to be very conscious, and people must be willing to do that, okay? So let's look at multicultural teams. We all know that there is a lot of value in working with multicultural distributed teams. They bring wider horizon, breadth of vision, variety of ideas and approach, stimulating interaction, regional knowledge, balance of priorities, multi-focus, language pool. I mean, it's wonderful. Now, the biggest problem of all of this, and I told you our education system is failing us, is that if we do not know how to adjust to those cultural differences, all of the above is wasted. Because we don't see any of those qualities. We just don't know how to tap into it. This is not Agile specific, but it's an important research. And it shows that homogeneous teams are in fact much more performant than diverse teams. Why? Because so few of those teams really know how to work together. So if you look at the diverse teams manage poorly, very high, diverse teams manage well, very low. And those are studies that keep on being spitted out, and they keep on showing us the exact same thing. And as I told you, this trend is here to stay. We need to learn to work across cultures, because otherwise we're going to continue to have very low performance, and it's very costly. And in addition, you lose constant talents. People disengage. People leave. So we need to do something about it. Cultural anchorages, we're talking about how the brain really, works when those connectors are made. So here is a linear brain, if you want, conditioned by the culture. Let's take a look at, a young child born and raised in America by two American parents. The cultural anchorage are facts, planning, products, timeline, word-deed correlation, institutions, and the law. Those are the main anchorages that we will find in an individual born and raised in the United States. Now, we go to Brazil, for example, and we realize that the anchorage of family instead of facts, hierarchy, relationships, emotion, eloquence, persuasion, and loyalty. Loyalty replaces the law. You know how this works? Let's go to Asia. Let's say the Philippines. Intuition, courtesy, network, common obligation, collective harmony, and the concept of faith. So those are the anchors. Those are the things that people have been drilled to know about and that have been really built their own integrity. Very different, right? Not all at once, by the way. Respect within cultures. We talked about respect. I told you it's a loaded word, right? Well, in the hierarchy culture, the yellow and the red, respect is au dû. In French, for example, on vous doit le respect. The language reflects this. In the United States, in the English, we say respect is earned. Big difference right there. You have to prove yourself to me and you will earn my respect. I mean, people come to this country with PhDs and, they come from very high status back home. And people here, they don't care. They call them Bob and, the doctor acronym goes out the window the minute that they meet them. People don't even know how to find themselves in a culture like that, where respect is not due but earned. If you look at titles and degrees, we just talk about it. Here we value results. I don't care that you have a PhD from MIT. If you cannot do this, and if you cannot bring the results I need, you can have all the degrees in the world. I don't care. Seniority. Many cultures value seniorities when here we value innovation. The younger you are, the Mark Zuckerberg, all of the young kids who here have become extremely famous and have brought us great products. In Europe, in Asia, so much more difficult. It is slowly changing, but it's very, very difficult to make it just because you're young. You need to be older. We may take your ideas and give it to an older person, but you as a young person, is very difficult to get the respect or the notoriety for it. Value experience, here you value ingenuity. Proceed with formality, proceed casually. I mean, when I travel the world, people always say, Americans are so unceremonious. The way they dress, the way they eat with their fingers, the way they greet one another. Hey, dude, how's it hanging? It's a world in itself, isn't it? Value bureaucracy, value efficiency. So we have a very different concept of respect. Now let's look at trust. I told you, loaded words, very different from one dimension to another. Performance, do what you say, you will do. That's why here in the US, consistency, scientific truth, efficient officialdom. If you go to the red, Latin America, compassion, closeness, refusal to capitalize on others' weaknesses, showing the other one's own weaknesses. Very different model of gaining trust. Protecting the other's face, courtesy, sacrifice, reciprocal attention. So we are 180 degrees, but we all use the same words. We all talk about trust, we all talk about respect, but until we define what this means, respect means that when you tell me that you're going to finish your work and you put done, that check mark, it means that you really have done all the needed steps, right? People cannot read your mind. Their mind is wired differently than yours. We need to really outline how we gain trust. It's one of the most important concepts that I can share with you today. People do not know how to gain your trust if you don't explain it to them. Here are quickly some intercultural communication differences affecting trust. We all come from cultures where we do certain things that people dislike about us. Like in the US, people are really driven by business. So they go straight to business, They bypass all of the other formality. They don't want to come and visit you 5 times. They just want to do business now. Well, the world hates that. The British, if you have ever been to England and you suggest something, an idea, a project, whatever, and they tell you, we should have a meeting about this. Do you know what that means? It means, this is a stupid idea. When I have people coming back from England and they said, but they told me that we should have a meeting. They were serious about it. Yes, we should have a meeting. The Latin, they have a flexible truth. You know, don't pinpoint them and tell them, but on Tuesday at 2 p.m. you said, ew, don't do that. Their flexible truth is just part of the speech pattern, so don't call them on it. Silence, the Japanese, the Finnish are extremely comfortable with silence. In the United States, you just have to be silent for like 3 minutes and people will spill their guts. They're going to tell you everything you want to know because they're so uncomfortable with silence. It's true. I'm not good with silence either. Smiles, you know, with Asians. Humor, the British, verbosity, loudness, ambiguity. We all have certain traits in our cultures that, because we're not familiar, create distrust. Now, very quickly, I just want to show you, because we don't have a lot of time, but I want to show you some of the differences in leadership, in communication, and I know that technical people really love graphs because you are visual. So let's look at those, and I don't have a lot to say, which I know is surprising, but when we go through them, I just want you to see the differences in the shape or in the colors, because it is quite indicative of how the culture works. In the US, people have the attention span of a fly. When you go to them, you better have something to entertain them. You better have something, you need a lot of facts. You need something that will grab their attention. If you can talk about money, then you are good. Otherwise, people will give you that much time. If you go to Brazil, and as I wrote in the description, we're going to compare the US, Brazil, the Philippines, and India. So in Brazil, people have also a very short attention span, but it's mainly because Carnival is right around the corner. And we have to work on our costume. So it's for very different reasons, but you need to constantly entertain them, and you need to be very eloquent. You need the reason why they will listen to you are practically the opposite than in the United States. Trust me, I worked for a Brazilian company for 8 years. If you look at India, people are really good listeners. They in fact, they are outstanding listeners. They don't like humor that much. The jokes that Americans constantly crack and always says, it's not good when you are in a situation where you have to discuss something of importance. Another thing that I want to share with you is that throughout the world, there is a complex of inferiority and a complex of superiority. You have nothing to do with it. It's just part of the dynamics of the world. When you go to Latin America, when you go to Asia, African nation, any nation that is an emerging market today, they bring with them an inferiority complex when they talk to you. So what you need to immediately understand is that you want it or not, they will consider you someone who is condescending to them. So you need to go the extra mile to not sound that way and not confirm that stereotype, right? That's part of that suspicious of ex-colonialist. And then I'm from Switzerland. I mean, everybody assumes that I'm rich. It's so not true. I mean, it's the same thing in the United States. I mean, if you go to Nigeria or whatever, you tell people you are from the United States, they think that you drive a Lamborghini. I drive a Saab, 1994 convertible. You know what I mean? It's just like all of those stereotypes that come, but we have, and you need to be aware of this. There is the inferiority complex and the superiority complex. And the superiority complex comes when we talk to people and we have that condescending kind of tone in our voice. So we need to keep that in check. What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean you don't know that? You should know that. That feeds into that inferiority complex and it becomes a snowball effect. The Philippines. You know that the Philippines today has bypassed India for all type of call centers and business processing, software developing. Did you know that? Yeah? And it is mainly because we discovered that it is a former US colony and people speak English like Americans. So that is why we have shifted a lot of the business there. So you will see more and more and more of the Philippines coming in your vision in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years. It's growing like crazy. And the big advantage is that literally they speak American English. They also really know how to give feedback. You know, they are not as reserved as the Chinese or the Vietnamese, Indians. So there is definitely an ease there for Americans. Now let's look at national communication patterns. This is the United States. You see in the middle it says wishes to do the business as soon as possible. That is the driver. Let's go down to business. They call people and they say, hey, I just have a question for you. I'm not ceremonious about anything else. I just have a question. I just need an answer. Go. And if you look, the orange deal shows where you will meet kind of resistance. And in the US, it's right at the beginning. That's why, you know, when that attention span, I mean, you guys invented the elevator pitch. I mean, who in the world tries to pitch anything in a 30-second ride? It's unbelievable, isn't it? But that's an invention from here. You also have a concept that I have learned, that is to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. Because we normally like to shoot before we aim. So you go, and then you have a plan B if it doesn't work out. In Switzerland, for example, it took us 25 years to join the United Nations. 25 years to join a non-profit organization. We didn't have a plan B. It just took us 25 years to establish plan A. You guys joined the minute it was open. And then you realized that maybe we should step out of it. And you did several times. It took us 25 years to decide, and then we are in, and we are still observers, by the way, but maybe in 100 years we will become active members, which is why we don't need a plan B and a plan C. So it's a very different way of making decisions, communicating, and so if you look at Brazil, a very different shape, right? Yep. So we don't have the time to go through each of them, but I just want you to look at the shape and the difference. Here is India. Here is the Philippines, right? Now, if we look at leadership style, because in Agile, communication is key, leadership is very important because everybody has to be more or less self-employed. So here is the leadership model of the United States. And you can see that everybody is quite independent. Everybody knows the parameters within the corporate bylaws, how much they can decide on their own. So that is the structure individualism, as we call it in my field. Here is Brazil. And very different model, right? Now, let's look at India. Yes. It is much more convoluted, isn't it? And you feel it when you are in India. I go there like 3, 4, maybe more, 4 times a year, and everything is incredibly convoluted. And when you look at this, you realize that leadership comes from the way our government functions, and our governments permeate the way our institutions function. And so everything trickles down from this. So definitely not a linear process. Now here are the Philippines. And I was telling you about Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines and how even though today it is a democracy, things are still very much, it takes an incredible amount of time, by the way, for cultures to adjust to new process. It's very slow. So you can see that in the Philippines, it is a very lean process that is very top-down. Concept of time. We talked about this briefly in my presentation last year. We talked about this at great length. But look at the difference between a linear active, you guys. You start with A to F from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can literally articulate how your day will go the entire time. Now, if you go to Latin America or Asia, you will realize that things are thrown around much more, and that linear process is not automatically logical as a linear would think. Meetings. I know for a fact, because I have been invited to spend a lot of time in Agile meetings, that you love them. So, so meetings are great, but once again, as everything we discussed this afternoon, like everything, everybody brings their own way of doing things. So this is a linear, active type of meeting, and you will realize that you guys come with an agenda. You come with a bullet point type of deal. We do minimal amount of small talk at the beginning. We are here for a reason. We're in and out, right? We're efficient. Now, here is a multi-active meeting. There is a lot of extensive small talks. And then things are, discussed not in an order that you bring to the equation. It's all together, and the goal of the meeting is to reinforce relationships, to reinforce why we are there and how we mean, what we mean to one another. So you don't go to a meeting with people from Latin America expecting to have clarity at the end of the meeting and like action required to-do list at the end. That's not the goal of a meeting. If you need that, you will have to do it differently and outside of a meeting. Same thing in Asia. In Asia, when I worked for my Taiwanese company, what I realized that every time that there was change in the company, which was not often, people would come to one another and they would say, what do you think of this? How will this affect you? What is your position on this? And then they will go to the next person and they will seek consensus outside of the meeting. By the time they were in a meeting, they already knew what everybody else's position was. And very, very limited amount of discussion or whatever. It was ready to kind of converge because the people who were opposing it knew that, well, there is no point of arguing or wasting time on this because most people already agree to that specific decision. So that model is in fact very accurate in my experience on how an Asian meeting happened. The other thing that I learned is to never ever go to a meeting in Asia with like new topics that people have not been able to discuss ahead of time and ask them for their opinion. That's like harakiri right there. You are asking them to risk the possibility of embarrassment, and not only they will not share in and they will not talk to you, but they will probably start disliking you violently. So make sure that when you leave the meeting, you tell them what is the agenda for next week or next day so they can prepare and decide what their position will be. So, in my opinion, we talked about collocation, we talked about communication, we talked about a lot of things, problem solving. For me, it is very clear that Agile was not originally designed for distributed multicultural teams, right? It is a fact of our times that we are now outsourcing so much of the work. So here are a few suggestions for you to take into consideration when you do that. In fact, this is just a recap of what we talked about, the transparency process and mistake. We talked about all of that. But what I wanted to tell you is not here. Hold on, here we go. Yeah, what a concept. What I really would like for you to do when you have new team members joining your team, or if you are in a position of authority within your company, spend the time to talk about all of those concepts at the time of onboarding. You're going to save so much time if you are able to define those goals and objectives, and if you are able to bring people together, because we have understood that that cultural DNA that everybody brings into the equation. This is like a taboo. We don't talk about it. We just expect that by miracle things will just resolve themselves. They don't. They really don't. Small teams, of course, if you can have small teams, that's always so much easier. Local Scrum Masters must have a very high travel budget. This is one of my pet peeves. Most companies nowadays, they don't want to invest. They are outsourcing because it's cheaper to hire developers in India or in the Philippines, and because they are not the one doing your job, right? They don't understand that you need constant communication and you need what I call the ambassador. You need people who will represent those teams. The face-to-face is extremely important. My recommendation is, instead of hiring, let's say, 10 people for a team, hire 9 and use that $100,000 or whatever the salary would be to travel. That is, I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference, because you finally don't have to constantly beg for money in order to go visit your team when you have problems. And people can go back and forth, and it gives you a lot of leverage and leeway. Please invest in communication technology. I have such a hard time when I work with high-tech companies that even invent camera, webcam, and they don't have them on their machines. I mean, what an irony is that? I mean, I work with people who have worked for 2 years with someone in India, and when I said, but how old is this person? You know, what do you know? And they said, I don't know. And I'm like, well, why don't you, when you see them on the camera, what is the assessed, you know, age, what is it called, range? And they said, I have no idea, we don't talk on camera. Well, you can, and you should. Because across culture, the face-to-face and the non-verbal communication that our body portray is part of this animalistic kind of need that we have. We need to see how people react to what we are saying. And it is so telling. So please, especially when you have bad news or when you have something difficult to say, email is your worst enemy across cultures. Your worst enemy. Just remember that. Develop a set of working agreements, when to escalate, quality coding convention, etc. Key concept, definition of done, things that basic. You know, have a lexicon of speeches, of expressions, of anything that you use within your team, and ask your team around the world to do the same thing. So you have something to work with and something to rely on. It will make a world of difference, I can assure you. Set up clear working conditions. You know, I see teams that are so burned out. People are working 15 hours a day because they have to do their day shift, and then they go home, they eat, and at 7 o'clock they are back on to deal with India or, you know, whatever outsourced team they have. And it's okay to do that when you are in a crisis and you have really something to resolve. You can do this for a couple of days, but to do this as a way of life is the fastest and biggest killer that you can find. People disengage emotionally. When you're tired and you're working all the time, you just cannot do a good job. I'm European, I believe in 6 weeks of vacation when you start the job, you know, and then you accumulate to 10 weeks, maybe 12, depending on what you do. No, I'm exaggerating, but it is important to realize that you are not machines, you are not robots, and you need to work 8, maybe 10 hours, but no more. It will not lead to productive results. And across time zone, it is so easy to work all the time. So Scrum of Scrum meetings, you know better than anyone. We have 3 more minutes. I want you to know, so this is the program I told you about. If you are interested, write to me, and I'm going to send you 1 free month for you to do your cultural DNA, and I can open it to 4 people within your team. So you can compare. It's a very cool tool. It allows you to look at your cultural DNA, compare it to 107 countries throughout the world, and it shows you where the clashes will be and where you may have to work on refining your communication. Okay, so pretty important tool. And you just have to email me. My contact information are right here. In the last minute we have, and if you want to talk to me afterwards, I will be here. But I want to tell you a powerful story that I think you may enjoy. I worked with a company, and they had a lot of problems, and I went literally all around the world to help them fix whatever problem they had. 1 minute? I have 30 minutes? Oh my God! Let me tell you about my life. he told me I was ending at 2:45. I was just like, okay, well, I will have to go fast. So this is great. I have a fabulous story for you. So it started in 1975. Let me have some vodka so I can entertain you for half a minute. Okay, I met this guy, right? Because wherever I went throughout the world, all of those distributed teams, everybody told me about this guy named Paul. And everybody was very unhappy with their work condition. Everybody felt that they were mistreated, misunderstood, that the inferiority complex kicked in a million times. But each time I heard about this guy named Paul. And it turns out that Paul is an American who lives in Utah. So after all of my travels, I ended up in Utah and I met Paul. And I told him, I said, oh my God, I need to sit down with you. We're doing lunch, dinner for a week because I need to understand how you became so good at working across cultures. Wherever I go, people, you are the Messiah. You are the Messiah of me. I was thinking I could hire him. And he said, I know, I have never lived abroad. I don't speak a foreign language. He said, I'm the only Mormon who was not sent on a mission because I dated a girl and they found her in my dorm when I was at Brigham Young and I got kicked out of the church. So the guy never went anywhere. But I said, this is amazing because you have this incredible talent. I mean, it's not just with India, it's not just with the Philippines, it's not just with Brazil or Mexico. Everywhere, people tell me that you resolve and understand and work around. And he said, well, I think I know why. So he told me that 10 years prior, he had his first son, and his son was autistic. And in discovering that his son was not wired, once again, we're back to the brain, the same way than he expected, he had a lot of problems. And he said, I'm going to tell you, I was a guy who was so impatient. I was, excuse my French, it's my native language, I was a hard ass. And he said I was hard on everybody. I had no patience, no tolerance for anyone. And he said, and then bang, I have a son who is autistic. So he said, for the longest time I tried to change my son. And then finally, like 4 years into it, I adopted my wife's behavior. She had developed an innate sense to communicate with him, and he would communicate with her. And she listened, and he really communicates differently than we do, but he does communicate. And he said, I just realized I had to become a different person in order to have a relationship with my son and to be able to interact. And he said, unconsciously, I took this new set of skills to the workplace and I changed job in the mix. And he said, this is when I realized that by being patient, by being extremely receptive to the differences that people were bringing to the table, because they might be wired differently than I am. And I just showed that to you, right? But he brought this to the workplace because of what he had discovered with his son. And it was a transformative experience for him. And I will tell you that this guy, if I could hire him, if I could pay him enough, I would like to have him on my team because he has understood how to connect with people who do not have the same wiring than he does. And that's what it comes down to. When we are in a meeting, when people start talking like they talk in circle, we cannot see their point. So if you are the meeting moderator, our instinct is to cut in and redirect or bring it back to the point. Well, this is the fastest way to humiliate, to embarrass, and to criticize somebody. So they have a point. Those people are bright. And they have a point, but they are bringing it to you in a way that is not automatically the same way than you would. And so my recommendation to you is that as you work with cultures, first increase your patience. I know that you may think, I don't have time. I already work 15 hours a day, I don't have time. If you do develop those different behaviors, you will work less and you will have better results. And also, whatever is not working today, there is a reason why it's not working, it's not sticking. So you need to find a different way to work with people, to really meet them halfway. And I can guarantee you that there are ways to do that. And it is worth investing in it because this is here to stay. It is not going away. For the next 30, 40 years of your life, you will be working across cultures. So the faster you learn how to adapt your behavior, your expectation, anything that you do at work, the faster you will become efficient and recognized, like Paul, as someone who, and you know, I don't know if Chris, yes, you hear, Chris was telling me this morning, she said she has only been working for 1 year with multicultural distributed teams with India. And because she's a natural at it, she's good, she's already receiving job offers from people coming to her and saying, we need you, we have so many problems. And I can attest, I need, if I could find people who have those skills to put them in those teams and create those bridges, it will make a world of difference. And you can invest in that. You can really learn how to become better in that global platform. It is, trust me, it is really here to stay. So we now have 20 minutes for Q&A. I thought you would have none. So please, shoot. Oh, not all at once, please. It's disruptive. Come on, you must have questions.
As
yes.
a development center in India, and we have all the standard problems that I think everybody in the room is familiar with and that sort of thing. But one of the other issues that we deal with is that the seniority difference between the developers in India and the developers here, onshore, is substantial. And so we're dealing with, developers over there that might have been there 2 or 3 years on average. Developers here have been here for 10 to 20 years on average. And so it creates some weird dynamics, and it's an additional challenge to all the other stuff. And I guess I'm wondering what your reaction, or how, if you've run into that, and if you have any suggestions in dealing with that kind of thing, because I think it compounds some of the cultural challenges.
I cannot see you anymore, Tom, but I'm talking to you. What I wanted to say that there is nothing you can do about age difference, right? It's here to stay. But the compounding effect is that I assume that you American developers do not want to be put on that seniority pedestal type of deal where India might look at them as people they cannot talk to directly because they are older. Are we on the right track here? Okay, so that is a very difficult, and my suggestion would be to find someone who is a bridge, who is not, who doesn't have 10 to 15 years of seniority and doesn't have 2 years, but someone who may have been in the field for maybe 8 years and who brings a lot of experience in that multicultural group. And that person would be the buffer in between the two. Because you are right, when we think about seniority in a country like India, and I know we have a lot of people from India, so I would love to hear from you and to know if we're on the right track or not. But the seniority concept is so ingrained, right? It is so difficult to be an equal with someone who has been, a god, a developer for 12, 13 years in the United States. So you need that kind of in-between buffer for people to feel safer in their communication. Is it more than communication problems that you have? Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think that those cultural dimensions that we have briefly looked at, which is that social stratification, I was telling people in my noon kind of lunch session, one of the most powerful metaphor that I have found to explain to people, not just Americans, but like Brazil, a lot of Brazilians, it's a big country, same thing in the United States, self-sustained economy, so people have not left the country as much as Europeans had, or Indians, or people from economies where you just travel. And one of the most powerful metaphor that I have found to explain the invisible is that, you know, our kids, when they are very young and they cannot talk and they go to the park and they are bullied, they spit on one another. And we're horrified as parents, right? We're just like, oh my God, you know, don't spit. I mean, there is absolutely no place and no situation that would justify for you to spit on another human being. So now let's imagine that I'm from a galaxy where we spit on one another all the time. We spit on one another to say hello, we spit on one another when we have a disagreement, and this is the equivalent of us asking people to speak up. Well, if you think deep inside you, you have been conditioned literally from the tender age of 2 to not spit on other people. And suddenly I'm telling you, but it's okay. And I have told you several times that you can spit on me because I like it. I can guarantee you that it's going to continue to feel wrong. And you're not going to do it as a reflex. And so what we need to realize when we work with those teams is that those ingrained cultural behaviors, that it is the non-speaking and not, you know, sharing whatever they feel in their mind, is the exact equivalent of us suddenly being asked to spit on someone else. It's very deep. It has been conditioned from birth that it is disrespectful. Or the concept of time. You know, if when I worked for my Brazilians, I mean, literally, I had to stipulate the year on the purchase order. May 2013, no 2015. Because to them, the concept of time was so not important. So we need to realize that to bridge those differences, there is a lot of legwork that has to happen. And it's not just by telling people, but I have asked you to. We talked about the cultural neuroscience and how the brain is really deeply wired to respond to a culture. So it takes a lot of coaching, it takes a lot of time and support. And I know that to a lot of people, this is unappealing. You have not been trained to do it. It's a waste of time, or it's a time sucker. I have heard it all. I know. But it is our reality. I'm pretty sure that our children will not be in that position. We are the guinea pig of the 21st century. This is a new dimension for all of us to work on a global platform. It will ease itself. It will. But at this point, this is the reality that us in this room are stuck with. And we need to find a way to work together. And so, for example, putting a buffer is one of the bridges that you may be able to create. Also, I was telling you about the travels. Go see your team. Invest in that constant face-to-face interaction. It will make a lot of difference. Yes. Yes.
We've had great success with taking our team members and putting them in India for a while, and it's and becoming part of the team and helping them understand how to become part of the team. And we've just had great success. So yes. I'd highly recommend that.
Yeah, and that's very true. If you can do the cross-pollination, you know, where you bring people here for a year or two, that's ideal. But I know that in this economy that we are in, those type of recommendations are very difficult because very few companies want to invest in, you know, paying for an apartment for someone to live in Bangalore or in Pune. I mean, and all of this is part of the financial restrictions that we have to live with. But they are in between ways. And having someone on both teams who do the back and forth is the second best. Anyone else? Yes.
Do you have a recommended
reading list? Yeah, absolutely. Email me, and I can.
You tell me. Do you have one?
I do, but I mean, if you email me, I can send it to you. I don't have the author, but I mean, Global Dexterity is one book that is very good. There is another one that is called Cultural Intelligence by David Livermore. I mean, there are tons of resources, and I have read all of those books, and I would be happy to share the list with you. Email me. Here are, once again, my contact information. Here you go. Anyone else? Yes? Yes. Yes, it is. If you're part of a large corporation, I mean, this is normally done through like videos where people, they have to take classes on different things, and that's one of them. And if you can, once again, if you can do it as a team, it is much more powerful. But at the onboarding, if you can get that kind of information and just open people's eyes on those cultural differences and how it's going to affect them, I can guarantee you that you are already 40% ahead of the curve. And it is really sad because corporations only want to spend money when they have tried everything else and everything has failed. I think that being proactive, I mean, I want to see this kind of stuff in universities, but even at the university level, they have not been sold. I mean, there are a handful of universities in the United States that teaches cultural intelligence. I think 5 out of, I don't know how many thousands. So it's really a lacking skill that we have. But as I told you, we are the guinea pig of all of this. It will get better. But for you who are stuck in the trenches right now, I know your pain, and I know that, you need the tools in order to meet your counterparts halfway. So the onboarding could be done, definitely, it is through training. It is reading books, as this gentleman suggested. But I mean, how many people read nowadays? Oh, you're a group of readers. Hallelujah. 4 of you out of how many? 5. So, those are the things that if we had a universal way to all be trained on defining those objectives across culture, it would be ideal. We are starting this movement, but truly, the most powerful message that I hope I have conveyed with you today is that you have the power to understand how your culture has shaped you. You have the power to understand how, out of those 7 cultural dimensions, where you stand. And then you can adjust, because you cannot change the culture of India. You cannot change the Philippines, Brazil, but you can change the way you interact with people from those different cultures. That's very easily done. Yes.
That's actually the question I was going to ask, if you could expand on. What about the scenario where you have people individually brought in, usually on contract, but sometimes full-time, where there's a majority, telecom, I've seen this at T-Mobile, where they're on site.
Yeah.
And majority either from Pakistan, India, there you go. So now they're in your camp, your onus. Can you expand on the individual responsibility to do that versus a managing team to understand the cultural impact that might have and what your onus is? You see what I'm saying? Because now all of a sudden you've got that statement, but then both sides have an individual responsibility to try and understand that and meet that.
Yeah.
So where's the line? How to understand? Of course we want it to work at the end.
Well, the first thing to do is to explain this to team members, because once again, people come into the workforce with their own assumptions. They feel that the way they communicate is universal. They feel that the way they show you respect is universal. I try to show you the differences that you will find. And unless you have spent the time to really bridge those differences and to make people realize that their assumptions is not your reality, and vice versa, and that we must meet halfway. I am okay to get out of my comfort zone and give you a buffer on time, because I know that time management is difficult for you. However, there is a line in the sand, as Obama would say. There is a point where, in order to work together, we are meeting halfway. And you are also, for example, in Europe, people come 5 o'clock, they leave their BlackBerry on their desk, they don't take their laptop home, they are leaving, or they go on vacation for a month and they never check in. And my American counterparts here, they go crazy. They're just like, how can you do that? How irresponsible is that? What kind of a professional are you, shutting down for a month? They can go on and on. Well, so as you meet people halfway, you understand the type of concession that you would want from them and what they would want from you. Like, I'm going to give you a very basic example. When Americans write, because they are very business oriented, they tend to skip the greetings. They just go straight to business, right? There is no hello. I mean, it's a big generality. Many of you probably are very polite, but in general, as a culture, it's very business driven. And so I worked with a team out of Brazil, and the Americans, the project failed massively. This was $1 million project, so a true disaster. And then we really started dissecting why did that project fail, and not to blame, but to understand where the communication breakdown happened. They tried to do that through Agile. It didn't work. So we looked at it in different lights. And so the Brazilians understood that, you know, the time component definitely needed to be improved. We explained to them the consequences, which had never been explained, because the Americans said, but of course they know. Of course they know that when they are a week late, it has the ripple effect on everybody. No, they don't know, because in their culture, 1 week is nothing. It's not that a big deal, right? And so on the other side, I asked the Brazilians, I said, well, where would you like the Americans to compromise? Where is the constant aggravation for you? And you know what they told me? They said, you know, it would be super nice if they would start an email by saying, hello, Angela, how are you? Because truly receiving an email that says, I need document 23 by Tuesday, 5 p.m., thanks, is really putting me in a bad mood. I start my day aggravated. And when I send them a nice email and I say, how was your weekend? You know, they could respond and just put a little bit of humanity, because we are people. And remember how I showed you how they are relationship driven? You are not going to change that. This is the anchorage. This is where it is grounded for them. And we cannot change culture. Only one thing changes culture when we look at the history of the world, and it is war. Massive wars that have decimated entire countries, that has had the effect of altering the culture. So my preference is to have to, you know, deal with war. But it is truly, we need to realize that, and I have this constantly. I have American companies contacting me, and they want me to go train. You and I had this conversation, Brian. They want me to go train the Filipinos and the Indians, but they don't need the training. Oh, no, we're good. Well, we know. You know, we want them to be like us. We don't want to meet people halfway. Well, if this is the way you think, then you will never be part of that global platform. You will never be the Paul that people mention and come to when they have a problem. And I want you to be the Paul, because not only you will have better opportunities, but when people like you, when people trust you, and when people respect you, they will move mountains for you, irrelevantly of their creed, their skin color, or their religion. This is a universal fact. They will buy into you. But for this, you need to treat them with respect. You need to engage with them at the same level of professionalism than you do with your local colleagues. You know, there is a lot of things that we do without realizing what we do. And we have those impacts like that complex of superiority and inferiority that plays against us, even us having to do anything with it. It's just part of the inequalities we had in the world. But there are so many things that you can do. And just keeping in check, for example, the tone of your voice when you talk to people. You know, when there is a problem, when you engage with them, I don't know if Michael is here, but Michael in my earlier session was saying, instead of saying, why did you do that? To just say, I'm wondering, how did this come around? You know, how can we support you better? Because obviously this is a problem. And, you know, I mean, just our language and that directness that we have is an accusation. It is a constant, you know, the spitting in your face, literally. And for the people on the receiving end who are not from that galaxy where we spit in each other's face, it's highly uncomfortable. So there is a lot that we can do. There is a lot, and truly the subtleties of working across culture is in the details, is in becoming a better person the world over, not just you, but them, all of us. It's in working together, and I know that this sounds like the Dalai Lama talking to you, but it's not. It is not. I have worked, as I told you, all around the world, and I have been able to meet people as human beings. And when you do, as I told you, they become your friends forever, and they're going to go the extra mile, and they're going to be super generous. So it can be done, but we need to invest in changing the way we interact with the world. Somebody was telling me in my morning session that, do you think the world thinks that Americans are condescending and rude? And that stigma is still there. It is still there. So a lot of people today are in fact very happy to see our country suffer. So we're going through economic downtimes, and they think it will teach us some humility. Well, maybe there is some truth to that, but at the same time, if it makes us more approachable, if they can relate to us better, instead of having that inferiority complex in a way, more power to it. But things are changing, things are evolving, and I can guarantee you that your generation is really one of the ones who is suffering the most from that globalization, because no one is equipped for it, and you are in the thick of it. You have been thrown into it without skills, preparation, or tools, and you have to be efficient. You need to be able to generate, money, and it's very difficult. I'm with you on that. Any other question? Come on, we have 4 more minutes. Yes.
But what would you change about Agile to make it work better?
Everything? No, that's not true. What I really would like is to see more flexibility. There is one thing that I have discovered within Agile, is that the manifesto and all of the doctrine is telling you that you need to be malleable, that you need to be flexible, that you need to be transparent and vulnerable. But the doctrine is not. That's why I was making that joke with the communist regime. It has a lot of similarities in a way. I would like to see Agile to be, because it is a great tool. It is definitely, for such a quick changing world, is a tool that is allowing a lot of teams and companies to be quick on their feet. But it is a misconception that everybody understands those great concepts the same way than someone born and raised in the United States. That is a lie without videotape. It's really something that we need to address within Agile. So my recommendation is to put that flexibility and that buffer. Like, for example, on Karen's team, if I may, Karen, there is a girl who is extremely multicultural. She has lived in India, and she told me one thing she does is that, to be transparent, there is a screen where you have to put 100% or 80% on your level of completion, at least in your program at HP. And she said, it's a waste of my time to look at this, because my Indian colleagues, they always put 100%, even though they haven't started the process. But because of the concept of saving face, they will always put 100%. So she said, I'm using this as a conversation starter. I do not use it as a tool to assess where they are at. I just look at this, I know it's 100%, I start by congratulating them on how efficient they are, and then we start digging into where they are and in offering assistance, in saying, remember that if you are behind by any chance, I have some resources that we can put at your disposal in order to speed up the process. And when you come from a place that is not to blame, that is not saying, I know you're behind, you cannot be at 100% anyhow because we're not. It's a very different dialogue right there. And she says that most of the time people open up and say, really, you could help us? Because we are behind. And this is where the true productive exchange takes place. But Agile has those very rigid tools, because she was telling me that she's in Sunnyvale, and she said, I have no problem. If we are behind and we're at 70%, I put 70%. Because I don't have a problem with, saving face. I don't have a face. It's not part of my anchorage, but it is part of theirs. And as I showed you with those 3 little boats, if they are there, it's because they are meaningful. So we have to work around them. And Agile is full of little things like this that in this culture work well. But then you say, no, maybe it doesn't even. So adaptation. I don't know if any of you heard Linda Rising last year. And she's an Agile expert. And what I loved about her, I connected with her after this conference because I ran this by her. And I wanted her input on first, if I would get killed by you. She said no. And I wanted her input in understanding, is Agile a flexible model? Do we have the possibility to push the box? And she said, yes, absolutely. So I think that the possibilities are there. We just need to think outside of that box, and we need to realize, first and foremost, that the one size fits all is a lie. Yeah, did I answer your question? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have made up the time.